Okay, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I'm so good at ComfyUI, I can generate images, I know to select the correct checkpoint, I can generate high quality images, I can use LORAs to generate specific things that I want to influence the styling, I'm a master of prompts, but there is still one problem. You are missing control. Eventually, what the AI generates is what was generated using the random seed. Here comes ControlNet. ControlNet gives you the ability to control in details what you want to generate. You can generate specific shapes. You can control the composition of the elements in your image. You can control the position your character is in. You can control the way it holds its hands, its face. You can control the little details in your character or in your generation. So let's not waste any more words. Let's just dive in and make you the puppeteer of the text-to-image model. Let's go. So as always, we're going to start with the default workflow, but this time we're going to trash it. Just click on the clear, click OK, and you have a new blank sheet that we can work on. If your anxiety kicks in and you really want your default workflow back, just click on the low default and it will reload and reset your workflow to the default one. But once again, let's click clear. ControlNet needs two things. It needs to load an image that will be used as the reference or as the guideline for the ControlNet, and it needs a node that actually applies the ControlNet guide onto the model. And we're going to talk about four main types of ControlNet that can answer you on the vast majority of requirements you'll have from a text to image. So we're going to use this image as a reference guide, and from this image I have extracted the four types of ControlNet, and we will see how they relate or how they are in respective to the image itself. Later on I will show you how you can extract your own guides from a specific image. And let's start with the first ControlNet guide type, which is called depth map. And depth map maps the depth of the elements in the image based on their distance from the camera. So if you look here, every element that is closer to the camera will appear brighter. This is why we can see the head and the legs and the left leg of the character a bit brighter than the rest of the body. And if we look here, the AI estimates that this leg and this head are a bit closer to the camera. This is, by the way, also can be used in a 3D software like Blender to generate the illusion of a 3D image. We're not going to deal with it here. If you like me to do a video about that, no problem, just let me know in the comments. The AI is going to use it in order to know how to construct the elements of the image. The next type of a ControlNet guide is called pose. We have several types of poses. The most common one is open pose, and what it does is generate some kind of a skeleton, and there is a color coding. Each color represents a different limb in the body of the character. It creates this skeleton that fits to the positioning of the character on the image. You can see that this specific pose, open pose guide also includes points that show the facial features or the face positioning, including the eyes, the nose, and the mouth of the image or of the character. And it also includes the hands positioning or the pose of the hands. The next type of guide is called Canny, and Canny is kind of a rough outline of all the strongest features or the strongest outline of the image. You can see that it details the eyebrows and the eye sockets, and you have here some information about the nose and the mouth, chin, the hands position, the elbows and stuff like that. And this will give the AI an overall understanding what is the structure of the image we want to generate. And the last ControlNet guide that we are going to deal with in this video is called sketch or a line art, and this is a bit more detailed version of the Canny, and it can literally show you a lot of information, including the hairs and the ears and the outline of the clothing of the model. You can see the wrinkles on the clothing here. So it's kind of a more detailed information for the AI. There are several more ControlNet guides, but these are the four most common ones, and these have a full support from Stability AI, and this is why I'm going to concentrate about it. But all the ControlNet features works exactly the same, with the exception of one called Recolor, which I will show you towards the end of this video. But let's not waste any more time and see how you can create your own depth maps or your own ControlNet guides, and how you can use that to your advantage in order to have absolute control on the generations of your text to image models. So as I said, there are two possible ways. You can either create your guides from scratch, and we will do such a thing later on, or you can take an image and extract the guide from that image. And what I usually do, I go to Pinterest, I simply type pose model in the search bar, and it will give you tons of images that you can use, that will give you all kinds of postures or positionings of the image. And it is very clear, it is made by models and you can use it. Of course, take note regarding license agreements and things like that, but for your own usage, of course, you can use any image in here. And as you can see, the variety is unlimited. So I have downloaded an image as an example, and let's see how we can use ComfyUI in order to extract the ControlNet guides from it. In order to do that, there is a very nice custom node called ControlNet Auxiliary. And what we're going to do, we're going to install it. The process is very simple. Just go to the Manage button on your ComfyUI. We'll go to the Manager and click here on the Install Custom Nodes. From here on the right side, you can simply type AUX, A-U-X, and click the search. Once you click the search, you will see that there is a node named ComfyUI's ControlNet Auxiliary. And this is the preprocessors. Preprocessors are what's doing the pre-processing of an image in order to convert it to what the ControlNet needs as a guide. So just click install. After a few seconds, you will see here a message asking you to restart ComfyUI. Click the restart, and once the interface reloads, we can start using the auxiliary nodes. And it's very simple. We'll start by adding a load image node in order to load our reference image. And I have already downloaded an image from Pinterest, and we click choose file to open, and we'll simply open this image of a kickboxer or whatever. And from here, we want to do a pre-processing, and we'll just drag the image output, and once we leave it, we'll click on the search. Here we will just type pre-process, and already on the start you will see ControlNet Preprocessor. This is from the custom nodes that we've just downloaded. Clicking on it will open up a very simple node that needs to accept an image and outputs an image. So from the image output, we will simply click preview image so we can see the result. And here you have some parameters that you need to understand. The first parameter tells the processor, the preprocessor, what type of guide we want to generate. We talked about 4, but if you open the list, you'll see that there is a whole bunch of them. I'm going to concentrate on the 4 that we talked about, but I will show you 1 or 2 additional guides. But let's start with the Canny. We'll choose the Canny. And here on the SD version, it's kind of important. It's not that critical because eventually it will generate a very similar image, but there are some small nuances between the images. So it's better to choose SDXL if the model that you're going to implement the ControlNet on is SDXL, and this is what we're going to do. And on the resolution, of course, I will use a high resolution. This will give the map or the guide image much more details. And usually I try to keep the resolution similar to the resolution that I want to generate in my final generation. And once we've chosen this concept, we will simply click Q prompt. On your first time that you're doing it, what will happen behind the scenes is that the preprocessor will note that you don't have the Canny model, and it will download the model. All those models download very fast. There are a few dozen megabytes, not more. And once you will click the Q prompt, it will take a few seconds on the first time, but after you downloaded the model, clicking the Q prompt will basically generate the guide in a matter of milliseconds. And you can see that very quickly we have what is called a Canny outline of the image, and it gives us a rough line of the image with the areas that have more details will have more lines, and the areas that have less details will have less lines. Let's just keep this image for later on for us to use. And once again, let's now choose the line art. The line art is called either a line art or a sketch. And what it does, it's very similar to the Canny, as we said before, but it gives me more details and it's more fine-tuned to the finer details of the image. And once again, we're going to save the image. And the next one that we're going to choose will be the pose. So you have three options for pose. I usually use the open pose. It works almost any time. If you encounter a situation that open pose doesn't do a great job, you can test the other two, but I'm going to do open pose and use it. Once I will click the Q prompt, this one takes a second or more than the other ones, and it analyzes the image. It will generate the skeleton that we've seen before. Once again, every color represents a different limb in the image, and later on we will see how the ControlNet handles this and process it. So we'll save this image, and the last one that we're going to do is depth. On depth you have basically two types of depth. You have depth Midas and you have depth and depth Zoe, which are very, very similar. But let's start with the depth Midas and click on the Q prompt. Once again, it will take a second or two because it needs to analyze the image. You can see that it gave me an overall look of the depth of the image. You can see that this leg of the left leg of the model and the left hand of the model seems a bit brighter, meaning that the AI correctly assumed or correctly analyzed that these limbs are closer to the camera. But if you see the other aspects, for example, the chin or the second hand, you'll see that there isn't much different in the depth map. So I'm going to save this one, but I'm going to do the second depth model, and let's see if it gives me a bit better results. And let's give it 1 or 2 seconds. And as you can see, this one is a bit more blurry, but it gives me a little bit more details about the features. If we zoom in, I'm not sure that you can see it on the video, but here you have subtle changes in the facial features, and it depends on your requirement. If you want the depth to have a bit more details and a bit more precise when it comes to the shape of the face or the shape of the hands, you can use this map. On the other case that you just want the overall look of the shape, you can use the first or the depth Midas. And this is pretty much the four guides that we're going to use. Another one that you can just see and maybe use for other purposes. We're not going to use it in here. As I told you, there are several types. Let's see the scribble, for example. What the scribble does is more of a highlight version of the image. It just gives you the highlights of the vision of the image. It's actually kind of an abstract style. You can also use it as a masking if you want to generate highlights on a specific image and things like that. And there is something like the head that generates something similar to the line art, but a bit more soft and more thick. And just play with it, go over the pre-processing steps and see if there's anything that you like that you can use. But we're going, as I said in this video, stick to the main four. Now let's load the default workflow and see how we can use those images in order to generate a whole new image. There are two ways, by the way. You can use the generated image directly into the workflow, but because we already saved the guides, we're just going to load them. So I'm going to add a load image node here, and I'm going to select one of the images that we just generated. Let's say that we're going to use the depth one first, and once we have it, we know we can use it with a ControlNet. And the way to use a ControlNet is very simple. I will simply double click and I will search ControlNet, and you will see that there are two types of nodes when it comes to ControlNet. You have apply ControlNet and you have load ControlNet. So we will start with the apply ControlNet, and we see what it needs in order to apply the ControlNet into the image generation. Before we hook everything up, I want to show you an example of the prompt that I'm creating, and we will see how it generates the image without the ControlNet, and later on we will hook in the ControlNet and see the differences. So I'm going to type in the prompt here. Let's just type a ninja warrior doing a high kick, a ninja warrior in a black, you know what, in a blue suit doing a high kick. So this is the image that we're going to do. Do note that the shape of the guide will also influence the shape of the generated image. So if I have here a portrait aspect ratio, and I will do a box, for example, a box image, it will probably cut the top and the bottom of the image. So on the size of the image, I'm going to choose something similar, more or less, to the image here. So I'm going to do it 768 in width, and let's say 1024 in the height. So it's a bit narrower than its height. I'm going to choose in the checkpoint the XL colorful. Also, I will put the link in the description. It's a very nice checkpoint that I've downloaded from the Civit AI. In here, we're going to choose the 14 steps. It's more than enough. And we're going to do a CFG of 6.5. For now, we're going to leave it on the Euler because the Euler works a bit faster and it gives me a rough results. Later on, if you want to do a more detailed version of the generation, I will simply change it to the DPM2. And let's just leave those two in the side, and I'll remove the save image and I will change it to preview image just so we can have a preview without automatically saving the image. And let's click the Q prompt and see what we get. Well, as you can see, once the image was generated, it's got nothing to do with the depth map because we haven't connected the ControlNet yet. And if we look to the referenced image, you will see that there's nothing in common between the images. Maybe only the fact that the leg is up and it's about to kick something. Let's see what happens if we plug in the ControlNet, and we will do it simply by outputting the prompt, the conditioning from the prompt into the applied ControlNet node, and we will take the image of the guide into the image input. And the last thing left is to tell the node what type of ControlNet we are using. And the way to do that is simply hook a ControlNet model loader straight into the ControlNet in. So we'll drag from here and just drop it. And here we will simply click on the search and we will write ControlNet, and you will see that you have a load ControlNet model. If this is the first time that you're running the ControlNet, when you click the list of the load ControlNet model, you will see an empty list, and we need to download the ControlNet models and put them inside our ComfyUI installation. And the way to do it is very simple. There is a ControlNet model that can handle SDXL related models, and there is a ControlNet model that can handle Stable Diffusion 1.5 models. In this case, in this link, and I will also add this link into the description, you can find the official ControlNet models that Stability AI released. And here you see you have two types. You have 128 and 256. It depends on how much VRAM you have. I usually use 256 and I have no problem. If you have very little VRAM, you can use the 128 version, but the results are usually better with the 256. And once you click here on the folder, you will see that there are 4 files. You have the Canny, the depth, the Recolor, and the sketch. We haven't discussed the Recolor yet, but we will discuss it towards the end of this video. And if you're wondering where is the OpenPose, there is no official Stability AI OpenPose model, but we do have a ControlNet for OpenPose that was created by Thibaud, and I will also put the link in the description, of course. And in here, you will see that you have also the rank 256 safe tensor, and you simply download the file. As for Stable Diffusion 1.5, you also have here the files and folders. Inside the models folder, you will see a list of all the Canny, depth, head, and a bit more models for the Stable Diffusion 1.5 that were generated by Elias Vil. And you can the same download them, and once you've downloaded these models, you simply need to put them inside your ComfyUI folder. So we'll go to our ComfyUI setup folder. Inside you will see that there is a models folder, and inside the models folder you will find a ControlNet. Simply move the safe tensor files into this folder, and once you've done it and you will go back to the ComfyUI interface, click refresh, and then when you open the ControlNet name, you will see the list of all the ControlNet model that you've downloaded. And we're using Stable Diffusion XL, we're using the depth map, so this is why we're going to choose here the ControlLORA depth rank 256, and this is the one, the official one for XL. Once we choose it, we will click the Q prompt. Let's put the preview image here and the guide image right next to it, so we can see if we get a similar results. And let's just simply click the Q prompt and see what happens. Now you can see that the result is very, very close to the original image that we've generated. And let's see, let's even load this image. And we will simply do it by adding a load image node. And in here, we will simply open the reference file that we've used. And as you can see, the resemblance is very good. And I want you to see something that is very important to understand when using a depth map. The AI model one-to-one tries to generate pixels in any place that it recognizes a depth. So if in this original image, the hair of the model is falling on her shoulder, here because we used a ninja and there's no hair coming out from the ninja's suit, it's generated some kind of a fabric or a ribbon that drops on the shoulder, and the results are quite spectacular if you ask me. And this is the power of ControlNet. It gives you absolute control on what you are generating. And now let's try something else. What if I don't want to generate a person? I want to use this depth map, but I want to generate, for example, a beautiful, colorful flower. So let's see what happens now. So now, as you can see, it generated a sort of a flower in the shape of the depth map that we've generated. So I assume you can see the potential of understanding the ControlNet and using the ControlNet. But what happens if I don't want to use an extracted depth map? I want to create my own. Well, there's no problem doing that as long as you understand that the white represents closer to the camera and black represents farther from the camera. And what we're going to do now, we're going to generate a depth map on our own and see how the text-to-image model handles it. And I'm going to use Photoshop, but you can use, if you don't have Photoshop, you can use any image editing software. So we open up Photoshop and we're going to create a new image. We're going to paint the background in black. And now what I want to do is take text, and I guess you already guess what I'm going to do here. I'm going to create a text, and then I'm going to use this text as my depth map. So let's do it like that. And this is more or less what we want. We're going to keep it rather simple, and let's just make it bigger so that the depth map occupies the vast majority of the image. And let's maybe use a more clean font. I want to use a thick font so the AI will have some areas to work with. And in order for the background not to be as boring, we'll just go to the filter and generate some clouds. And we can do it simply by the render and clouds. So we see that we have a little bit of background color. I created it in the range from black to a bit of a lighter gray. I don't want to do it too light because then the AI will think that it's in front of the camera, and it will try to generate the main object on the closer to the camera areas. So let's just save this image. I'm going to save it as a PNG 8. That's enough. And let's just save it and call it text. And now let's use this image as our guide for the ControlNet. Let's see how it works. So we are taking the image that we've just generated, and this time let's just type M&M candies on a blanket. Let's see how it handles it. And what we're going to do, we are also going to change the width to 1024 because this is the size of the guide that we generated. And let's go here, see that everything is okay, and let's simply click the prompt. So as you can see, what it generated, it tried to generate M&Ms on a blanket, and you can see that it tried to generate the text in the shape of an M&M. So I don't think this prompt really fits the type of guide that we've generated here, but let's try something a bit more fitting. Let's say balloons in the skies and see what happens. So now the image that we got is much more suitable, and you can see that it actually tried to create the text in the shape of balloons. I like the result, although I would probably run it a few more times until I get the result that I want. One thing to understand here when it comes to the depth map, that the prompts need to fit the depth map. If, for example, I will say now cracks in a wall, AI tries to make the text more in front of the camera. So I can reverse it, try something like that and see how it works. So we open up Photoshop, and this time we're going to inverse the concept, and we'll add some cracks here and here and here. We're simply drawing some things. Not sure if I'm going to make it actual cracks, but we'll see how it works. And let's just add some effects here, maybe like that. And now if I'll type cracks, it will probably try to make the text the cracks because they are farther from the camera. And let's see how it can handle it, and just save the image. Let's go back to our ComfyUI, and let's just click and reload the image. We need to reload the image, and let's click query one more time, but this time we'll change the prompt, of course, to cracks in a concrete wall. This should be nice. Okay, so let's see what we got. Okay, I really like this result. You can see that it generated the cracks where we added the lines. Let me pull up the reference so we can see it side by side. And you can see that it literally generated the cracks in the concrete based on the shapes that I created. So I really like the results. And you can see that it kind of understood that it needs to separate the text completely. And you see, if you look around the text, you will see that it's got some cracks around it. I think that the overall result is very nice. I really love it. And once again, I guess you understand the power of using the ControlNet with a depth map. Now let's clean it all up and let's see how we can use the pose and the Canny and the other stuff. So let's just load the pose, and we'll get back here to 768 by 1024. And once again, we leave this image here, and here we write dancer dancing in a ballet show. Let's see, let's do a dancer dancing in a ballet show. And this time we're going to use the ControlNet not as a depth map, but rather as the open pose that we've downloaded before. And let's click Q prompt and see what's going to happen. Unlike using the depth map, you can see here that the AI allowed itself to get out of the shape of the image because all we gave it here is information about the positioning or the pose of the character. So it only had to try and generate the legs in this position, and the hands. You can see that it seems like it didn't do the hands correctly, but looking at the open pose that it was generating, you can see that it estimated the location of the hand here instead of next to the face. So the generation was actually okay. And in the image that was generated, it indeed generated it based on the structure of the pose. And the advantage here is that it doesn't confine the generation to the shape of the depth, and it gives freedom to the AI. Now, what happens if we want to create our own pose? Fear not, because there is an easy-to-use online tool that you can use. Let's go over it real quick. So this is the tool. It's an online. You don't have to install anything. Here you can simply decide the size of the image that you want. So we had 768 by 1024. And you can move the camera, you can rotate the camera and choose your positioning. You can simply move the hands wherever you want, for example, and like so. It's really a simple 3D concept, and you can rotate the head, for example. You can rotate the shoulders, and you can just play with it. And once you are done, you can simply click here this small button, And when you click it, it will generate 4 images. It generates the structure itself. Let's just open it so you can see it. It generates the skeleton itself. And if you remember earlier, I explained that you can also have the hands. Let's take a look at the 4 images that it generates. It generates the skeleton. It generates a Canny of the hands and the legs. So you can add this detail later on to bound the positioning of the hands and the legs. And it also generated a depth map of the hands. So you can use this as details in order to control the figure or the positioning of the character that you're generating. I like the approach of using an existing image, but sometimes I also use this one if there is a very specific position or a very specific pose that I want to use on the character. The next thing that we want to do is use the Canny. Let's see how the Canny performs. And for that, we will choose the Canny guide that we generated earlier. And the same here, we're going to choose the Canny model. And let's just leave it here on a dancer dancing in a ballet show and click the Q prompt. And the run is done. And let's take a look at what happened. First of all, we can see that it also generated a very similar image. But please note here that it literally used all the fine details of the image. So if you look at the fingers of the image, they are also bent just like in the Canny reference that we generated, to the shape of the leg. And overall, it tries to match the details. And once again, if you want to generate your own, you can simply try and draw something. The last one that we're going to use is the sketch. So we'll open up the line art that we've generated before. This one. And here we're going to choose the sketch. Let's click a Q prompt and see what happens. And once again, very similar to the Canny, it created an image that tries to fit the line art that we've generated as close as possible. So the line art can be used easily if we want to create our own concept or our own composition. So let's make a test here and see how it goes. And once again, in Photoshop or whatever editor you want to choose, we'll do something like that. And let's just add something like that. Okay, and we'll use this. Let's add some details here and here and here. And here we'll add something like that. And let's just save this image. So we save this image. I saved it on the same name, but that doesn't really matter. And let's open it up. And this time, let's just type here an erupting volcano. Let's also not forget to make it 1024 by 1024 and Q prompt. And you can see that it generated the image. Now, because we used a very thick line, it actually incorporated it in the generation. But all in all, the image looks very nice. What happens if I want to use several control nets together? Well, it's very simple. Let's say for now, let's load this one. So I want to use this depth map, and I will try here, and I will change here to the depth map. And now let's say I want to add another control net of Canny, for example. So instead of chaining the conditioning here to the model, I will simply duplicate the 3 nodes. I was holding Alt and dragging, and here we will choose, for example, the file of the Canny, and here I will change it to Canny, and here we will also apply the Canny model. And from here, from the previous ControlNet output, I will chain it to the input of the next ControlNet, and then the next ControlNet will go to the sampler. And here, here, here. So it works very much the same. And let's see what happens now. You know what, let's leave it on an erupting volcano, and we'll see what kind of a monstrous generation will be happening here. Let's just change the width so it fits more or less the image size, and let's see what happens. And once it's done, the generated image is a great show of what ControlNet is able to do. So it used the depth map of the image, and it used the Canny to generate the details. It literally understood that we're talking here about a female figure based on the shapes, and it incorporated elements of the erupting volcano into the generation. I actually like this image. It can be much more improved, of course, but the general idea is very nice. I think that this sums about what you can do with ControlNet when it comes to guides. There is another one thing that we need to discuss, and this is the Recolor. So in order to go over the Recolor, let's go back to our default workflow, because the Recolor works a little bit different. You don't need to generate a new image based on your guide. Rather, your guide becomes the image itself, and it's simply being recolored. So the way to do it, from the default, let's once again change it to 14 steps, 6.5 on the CFG. Let's leave it at Euler, at normal. We'll choose once again the colorful checkpoint. And here, let's change it to 1024 by 1024. And now let's load an image. And we will load an image that is grayscale that I pre-downloaded, image of New York. And what we want to do is take this image and recolor it. Now, once again, notice that the output will be that exact image only with colors. So the way to do it is like so. Here we can write a beautiful city and bright blue skies. So we're giving an overall description of what we want to see. And let's take this idea. From the image, we will search the apply ControlNet once again. It works the same. And from the conditioning here, we'll pull it into the ControlNet, and from the ControlNet into the sampler. And now from the ControlNet, load the ControlNet model. And this time we're going to choose the SDXL Recolor. And once we run it, let's remove the save image, preview. And once we run it, we will expect to see this image, but this time with color. Let's see how it works. And if we look at the results, you can see that it tried to recolor the image based on what we asked, but because we only mentioned the word blue, it seems to have colored the buildings, some buildings also in blue. So let's try to be a bit more specific. So a beautiful city and bright blue skies, brown or concrete buildings, some trees, and let's see how it works. And let's see what we've got now. You can see that the result is much nicer, and I'm not sure in the image if this is sea. I guess it's water. So here it colored it like a field or sand. So I guess we can add the details here and a big lake on the bottom. And this is one option. So let's click the Q prompt, and there is another approach, and let's see how it works after this one. Well, as you can see, the image got a bit more vivid. It tried to do some reflections here. It didn't work completely. Let's try another approach. And this time, instead of being specific about what's in the image, let's just write colored image. And let's type Q. Let's hit the Q prompt and see what happens. And this time, the image that we got is very colorful. So you can see, you can actually play with all kinds of effects, try all kinds of different effects in order to generate several kinds of images. Let's see what happens if we type in sepia and see if it will do some kind of a sepia-ish color to the image. And as expected, you can see that now the image got some kind of a sepia effect, and the result is very nice. So you can play with it, you can generate different effects in your image. There are specific keywords that you can use, mostly from the photography world, and you can implement them on the image. But what's to take note here is that the generated image is actually a replica of the guide in the case of Recolor. So I hope you understand how powerful ControlNet can be, and it literally gives you the ability to control every aspect of the composition and the generation that you're making. You can also use ControlNet on video generations, but we will discuss this in future videos. For now, I really hope you found this video useful. If so, please hit the like, please subscribe, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.